Sign an initial to anything and everything that they're going to have to be held responsible for. You will come in with $500 on Monday, initial it. You're going to be responsible for cleaning the carpet, initial it, etc., etc. So it all sounds very simple. This is an old one of ours, actually, but this is sort of the kind of thing that we have.
By the way, your lease can state that the tenant pay for professional carpet cleaning. That is allowed, but not for professional suite cleaning. But for professional carpet cleaning, if it was done when they moved in, the lease can state that, and residential tenants arbitration will allow that as a cost to the tenant.
We try to make sure that people do that anyway. We try to make sure that people do professionally clean.
Yep.
We try to get a very high standard. We let them move in with a high standard. We like to have them move out with that same high standard. Like we've got here, the third pitfall is the move-in inspection report. If you don't have your inspection report, as Lisa touched on before, you have to pay back your damage deposit in full. There's no discussion. So regardless of what the tenants have done, if you don't have that piece of paper and you can download it online, it's the move-in inspection report, remember that. And you've got to have them sign off on it. If there's any scratch when they move in, or there's more scratches when they move out, and then the charges for remedying it can be charged to them out of their damage deposit.
And you must have them sign and initial all of the deductions. And I know that sounds very, very hard to do, so it's very important that you make the appointment with your tenant, walk through the suite after they moved out, and do your best to get them to sign for all the deductions, because if you don't, it's very unlikely that you will be able to collect that in arbitration. And if you don't get them to sign, let's say they refuse to sign or they refuse to come in to do the walkthrough inspection, then you cannot go to arbitration. You must go through a collection agency. Good luck with that. So it's very, very important to have a good relationship with your tenant and make it so that they're not afraid to come and sign off on it. And if they do not provide a forwarding address on this form and you cannot find them, there is no way you can file for arbitration anyways. So not only do you need their signature and their initials on the deductions, you must have the forwarding address to be able to forward the papers for arbitration if need be. Very important.
We had an arbitration, actually one of my own personal properties. Just recently, the arbitrator threw it out because he didn't deem that we'd served the notice properly to the tenant for the hearing, even though he owed us several $1,000s. This guy had run it up. It's a long story. Yes, sir.
Could you speak into the mic?
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. How's that? There you go. I'm trying to give it to Lisa. Is that better? Okay, the fourth pitfall you've got is late rent. Got to get on that right away. First day of the month, there's no rent in.
Second day.
Second day of the month, I mean. Yeah. Do you want to talk about that? Yeah. One of the women in the office goes through in the accounting department. We phone everybody and say, "Where are you? Come in with the money." And if not, we're serving notices immediately for eviction. We don't wait around. We get onto it right away. Very rarely happens. A lot of times people's lives do change slightly because life happens to them. They lose their jobs, their wife leaves them, this and that, one thing or another. They get a whole bunch of things. You get pretty jaded after you've been doing this for 20 years, but the poor souls. But they need to have a written warning. So if they're late with their rent, they usually will come in. As I say, we have a very strict and strong application process. So generally, they will always come in and pay up. I say 99.99% of the time. But as I say, sometimes life gets in the way and things do happen. But we always send them a written warning and a breach letter. Any offense, send a breach letter. It's important that you remember that if you're going to go to an arbitration, you can only evict with 3 breach letters, and it has to be for the same offense. So if they're throwing cigarette butts out of a window, you have to have 3 times cigarette butts, not 1 cigarette butt, 1 late rent, 1 noisy party. It's 3 of each, or 3 of 1. So noise, but as long as you've got these written warnings in, then you have cause to give 30 days notice and evict them. Remember, the tenants are not your friends. They'll try and be your friends, then they'll take advantage of it. Yes, sir?
Can you explain the 10-day notice for eviction on payment of rent? It works with, they have 5 days?
That's right. They have 5 days basically to come in. So what we would do is we would serve the notice, then they have 5 days. Generally everybody comes in within those 5 days. We then give a breach letter, so we have that on file that they've been late. they don't come in, then they have to leave within 10 days of that. There's pitfalls to that too. Sometimes if you think the guy's going to come in with his rent and he's a bit of a, it's a question mark kind of case, if you serve the 10 days, they're automatically gone and they can just pull up and leave. Sometimes they can use that as a ploy to leave by the middle of the month and just go, and you're holding the damage deposit. And then you're stuck for the other 2 weeks of the month. So sometimes we kind of think, okay, this guy will pay, but we'll hold off. You know, we're giving warnings, and we just play everything, we massage it a bit. So as we try and get the full month's rent out of it.
When you file for arbitration, you have to wait for those 5 days to come up?
Oh yes, you have to wait for that, and you have to wait for them to be gone. You're probably going to wait 60 days before you can get a hearing.
Because I have a tenant right now, and
What I would suggest is we'll let you finish the presentation, and then we'll hope you to stay for the break, and then everybody can.
Be happy to do that, yes. Illegal activities happen not only in houses, they happen in suites. I've seen very elaborate grow-up operations in condominiums downtown Vancouver. They put in huge plastic bags inside with giant zips, if you can imagine, inside the living room and the bedroom. And they've been doing this prostitution. Some of the best buildings in town, we were inundated with applicants, sort of Russian women coming in with ladies in the Shangri-La when that first opened. And now it's an absolute nightmare, the Shangri-La. The other day it was in the news, there was a guy being held at knife point, I believe, in there. There was a ransom and one thing or another. It's inundated with problem tenants, that building. Basically because people do not go through all of their due diligence. They don't hire professional companies. They do it themselves. They're throwing out on the paper, just get the first guy that comes along who's got $4,000 waving in his hand, and they forget that maybe next month he won't have it, and they're gone. And then they turn it into a brothel or a gambling den or a meth lab. And it's really quite unfortunate. But anyway.
Beware the tenant that wants to pay cash in advance. There's usually an illegal activity there.
Yeah, and then some people will say, okay, well, I'm getting $4,000 a month for a suite or whatever it is, and we know that the rent's $1,500 a month. Well, anybody who's paying double what market rent is, it means that there's a reason for that, that they don't stand to scrutiny. So just recapping here, why are we doing professional property management? Because we're experienced, we're able to deal with all the potential problems.
No, that's fine. Expertise in dealing with non-resident owners. We're on call 24/7 every day of the year for emergencies. Very, very important. Full screening of all applicants as we discussed, and our fee is tax deductible from income and capital gains. You pay us or you pay the CRA, as Nick had said, and we are the buffer between the owner and the tenant. You never have to meet your tenant, you never speak to your tenant, you'll never have to deal with your tenant. You just receive your net income on the 15th of the preceding month with your statements.
That's correct. So you want to leave the renting to us. And as I say, we are tax deductible, so at the end of the day, it's not really going to cost you anything.